Awesome. Even the guest was bobbing his head a little bit. Gotta love that intro. I am sober. I am a heathen. I am the sober heathen. I am Scott. Coming to you guys with another. I know it's going to be a great interview. Another great guest. This is Rich. I met Rich on Twitter of all places. We just had a few minutes talking. Baseball guy, so he's already a winner in my book. Rich is going to tell a little bit about his story here in a second. He's got 10 years of sobriety. I'm not going to ruin the whole thing. We're going to get right into it because I think when you have a guest, it needs to be about the guest. But don't forget, we are on Apple, we are on Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, and a couple other places. Check it out. You're not only supporting me, but you're supporting the guests that we have on the show that is being brave and coming out and experience or sharing their experience, strength, and hope. And that's not easy for everybody to do. And we're doing this for those people that are out there still struggling. So with that spiel over, Rich, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Hey, Scott, man, I'm doing great. I really appreciate the opportunity, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. So you just give me a little spiel here. You got 10 years of sobriety. Congratulations. Are we coming up on year 11 or where you at?
Just celebrated 10 in December. I feel weird blurting that out sometimes because I do know a lot of people like are newer, especially on Twitter. There's a lot of people who are brand new or, a couple months, whatever. This is not a competition.
No.
It's not a race. It's not a contest. I just happen to have been in the game on the positive side of it for a good little bit. And life has gotten better. A 10-year snapshot of anybody's life, Scott, as you know, is going to include some really bad days in those
Sure.
10 years. There's going to be some hard stuff, and that has certainly happened with me in sobriety. But yeah, been at it a while, and I'm really starting to kind of put myself out there a little more right now because I know that people really are struggling, and conversations like the ones that you have on this podcast are so instrumental. Not just the people who are considering getting sober, but to people like me who have been sober for a while.
Sure.
This is where I can connect, and what a treat it is to live in an age where through the internet, social media, we can connect like that, form almost an instant bond with our sobriety and our story, but then discover some things about each other and have some mutual interest, and it's just kind of cool.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I get it. I started the recovery process in 2018 and obviously didn't have much success up until 2022. But seeing 10 years pop up and like, man, how do they do that? It seems like, it seems impossible. But now that I got a better foundation. I've seen 10 years now. It's a motivating factor. And me being the competitor that I am, I always tell people that have more sobriety than me, don't let me catch you. Don't let me catch you.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So no, at 10 years, man. Yeah. And recovering out loud, I think it is important. I think it is when you can articulate things in a certain way and you can relate to people and tell your story so they know it is possible. I recover out loud, man. That's the way that I'm looking at it. That's the only way we're going to win this war. So
Absolutely.
in your email that you sent me, you said you went into a treatment at 16, 18 years old, was it?
Yeah, so my experience with with recovery and AA and all that began at a very young age. I'm trying not to describe myself as a bad kid anymore. I would say that, um, because the kid who's back there, who was 14, 15, 16, messing up, causing lots of headaches for my parents and all that, getting in trouble, getting in trouble with the police, etc. Uh, that's part of my story. And even though I wish that I could change some of the things that I did back then and grab that kid by the coat and shake him, that kid is important to who I am today. And I'm here because the me when I was 15 went through the things that I went through. First
Sure.
AA meeting I went to, I was 15 years old. I dropped out of school the day that I turned 16. I was really excited. I was defiant and rebellious, and I just wanted to get out. By the way, my dad was a lifelong teacher at the high school that I dropped out of.
Ooh.
So that was a supreme disappointment, and I have had a lot of guilt about doing that to my dad and embarrassing him. My behavior in the 4 months that followed my dropping out of high school in September of 1987 became so insane and worrisome to my parents that they were left with very few options as to what to do with me to protect my safety around my drinking and drug use. Drinking alcohol is my drug of choice. Little bit of, a little bit of weed, a little bit of acid, a little bit of mushrooms, but it was always the drinking that was the big thing for me. And they decided to sign me over to the custody of this place called Straight Incorporated. And this was a huge part of the troubled teen industry in the 1980s. The location that I went to was in Stoughton, Massachusetts. May have some people pop on who watch this or listen to it who are familiar with this place. It was a behavior modification, faith-based lockup type of environment. And they were using the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as a big part of that, almost as propaganda, if you will, to try and brainwash kids. So the rules in there, I mean, it was, you were confined, you couldn't leave, you could earn the privilege of talking to your parents 2 times a week, but only for like 2 or 3 minutes, and with only the supervision of some other person to watch you and listen to you while this conversation happened. And you were not allowed to tell them anything about what was going on in that place. You could only talk about your past behavior, and you had to make amends and, work your 8th and 9th steps and so forth. So it was all very new and very intimidating. I did manage to earn the right to go home, and I made it to, there's 5 phases in this program. And on the second phase, you do get to go home, but you're still going to the building, the warehouse, every single day. And it's all day, 12 to 15 hours a day of, group therapy. Yeah, this was a lot. And I had a full 20 months of it. And I managed to escape once, and I got out and I stayed out for a week, and they send the God Squad after you, which is just a collection of the other parents in the program, along with law enforcement who's looking for a missing person, right? Because you're a minor. Where is this person? Well, I was able to stay out for about a week before I got arrested and brought back. And so I had 6 months.
Get arrested?
I did get arrested.
Okay.
I did get arrested, and it was alcohol related. Imagine that. It was a Friday or Saturday night. I had been drinking, and it was with some friends in the park, obviously underage. And the cops rolled up, threw the lights on. A couple of people took off, including me, and I ended up getting arrested by Harvard University police. That's embarrassing when you're arrested by campus police. But HUPD picked me up, and then I ended up going to the city police station, Cambridge. And it's just weird. I don't know if I've ever said that publicly, but that's what happened. Back in another year goes by or more. And finally, when I turn 18, I'm able to get out September 1989. And it wasn't too long after that I ended up moving to Atlanta. But right after I got out, I actually did stay sober for a little while. I attended a lot of AA, had a sponsor, worked the steps, and then relapsed. Had maybe about 2-3 years. And then I drank, so I drank, and then I stayed sober for a little bit and moved to Atlanta. So I arrive in Atlanta a sober person, but relapsed here too. Right after the start of the Olympics, it was an interesting and exciting time to be a young man in a new city with this big event that had just wrapped up, and I got to be here with the whole lead up to the Olympics. It was very exciting. Atlanta is a cool place.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so I was here, I was attending meetings, and the Olympics came, and I was living with this woman, and thought that we would get married. I gave her a ring, and it just didn't feel like it was really going to happen, and I kind of knew that it wasn't. And that, along with all the other things that are just rolling around in one's head, I think can easily lead somebody like me back to a drink, and that's what happened. And I actually, after she and I had broken up, I lost my sobriety with her. We went out to a bar and drank. And so I drank from then all the way until December of 2012 when I got sober. So that is a 16 or 17-year span.
Sure.
And there are things in my I don't have any DUI in my story. I don't have an episode with the cops and searchlights or anything like that. What I have is some really, really dark and troubled times, some times that I really felt alone and that my drinking was just out of control. And it was also the furthest thing from my mind that alcohol was the problem, you know.
Sure.
My story in that time frame involves me being very mad at AA too, very resentful of what I had been taught because I felt conflicted. I liked drinking, but it's hard to drink after you know all the stuff of AA. It's really hard. And even some of the things that I've learned about alcohol since I've been sober have been extremely motivating. And now I feel very much solid in my sobriety because I understand about what alcohol is actually doing to my body and brain. And I didn't really understand that before. But it gets into you, and it got into me, and it took control of my life.
Sure.
And I just made a little post today. I do want to get to just our conversation and just chat back and forth. But
Yeah.
just to give you a little example of some of the dark places that I went, I had an overnight job working at this radio station, which, that was my passion. That was my career for a long time. I loved it. And it's something I'm very proud of. I did get to work in the business that I really wanted to work in when I was a little kid. And
Okay.
I got to perform at a very high level. And it was really rewarding and enjoyable. But on the inside, I was miserable. I got married in 2002, and I'm not friends with my ex-wife, but I have a friendly relationship with her, and I've kind of I think we kind of nod at each other now that we just kind of weren't the right people for one
Sure.
another. Um, but I was working overnights at this radio station, and I was married, and I would get off of work at about 5 a.m. and I would drive home, and I would stop at this gas station, and I would get a couple of beers. I would go home. I'd leave the beers in the car. I wouldn't bring them out. Wait till my wife is gone, and I'd get up and I'd drink. And that was insanity. And I knew that it was insanity. It would be 7 o'clock in the morning. She's driving to work, and I'm all of a sudden just beginning my party time at that point. And I can see the insanity of it now. I even saw the insanity of it then, but it was way suppressed down because when I am actively drinking, that's like the antidote for the truth.
Sure.
And the truth is that I needed to stop, and I just couldn't. And I felt like I deserved to drink, even if it was at 7 o'clock in the morning. I felt like it was manly to drink, even if it was at 7 o'clock in the morning. And that's what I did. And those couple of beers quickly turned into a 6 pack and maybe a 12 pack. And then I was getting tequila. And I was taking those bottles, Scott, and I was stuffing them into a trash bag and putting them in the trunk of my car so that my wife wouldn't find them. And saying that out loud and writing a little post about that this morning, I was like, I cannot believe that I behaved that way. I made alcohol a priority. I tap danced around it, and I tried to shield other people from it. But the more I think about it, they knew. They
Oh,
knew.
sure. Sure.
You know,
I know my ex-fiance is going to be listening to this and she's going to hear the part about you stuffing the bottles into a trash bag and to try to hide it. I know she's going to smile when she hears that because that would be my move is to tuck it. No matter what was in the trash can, I'd shove my arm way down in the bottom of it to hide the bottle and amongst all the crap so they couldn't be found. I relate.
and one thing too, you said this when I listened to your story. There's something that you said that I really latched onto, and I know that I kind of skipped over like my childhood. I came from a decent home, middle aged or middle income family. My parents were both public educators, back when that was a noble profession.
Sure. Sure.
And, but something you said when you told your story I guess it was a couple of weeks ago. You said I just used to lie all the time. I just used to lie to impress people, and you know, it wasn't true, and I knew it, I had a lot of that in my story. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted friends, but I never saw the value in the real me.
Sure.
So I would fake things or say things to try to get you to like me. And, honestly, that spilled over into my drinking too. It was really the same way, if I'm honest about it.
Yep.
And it's a horrible way to live, I think, for me, when I have all these little lies that are set up, and I have this group of friends that know this truth about me. These guys don't, and it's
Yep.
like, oh my God, I have got to make this stop. Well, finally, I'll wrap this up. December 2012, I didn't get my contract renewed with this radio station that I was working for. I had a terrific job, Scott. I was the afternoon drive host on a rock station uh,
Nice.
here in town, which meant that I could drink all night and still make it to work, in the afternoon. And um, the radio station flip formats, whatever it is that you're doing, it's going to end.
Sure.
And I knew that, and I enjoyed the moments, and I relished them, but I knew that it was going to end, and it did end. And a couple of months after the radio station was gone, I found the motivation to stop. I wish that I could tell you exactly, why or how. I know that my last drink was on a Sunday. I got hammered 2 times that Sunday, and I had to be driven home from the bar down the street from where I live at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is just another piece of insanity,
Sure.
you know. And the number of days that I have that were similar to this one, Scott, are just so many that I can't count. I wasted so much time. I wasted so much money, energy. Uh, the potential for me to perform at a high level in my job was always compromised because I was hungover and I was sad. I was fat. I remember trying on a pair of jeans one time that was a size 40, a size 40.
Yep.
And it was just awful. Woke up on a Monday morning, December 17th, 2012, knew what I needed to do, wasn't intimidated by AA at all. So that's where I went. And I started just going to meetings. I said, I need to be, to myself, I need to be out of the bars, away from the liquor store. I need to have stuff to do. I went to meetings. I just went to a ton of meetings, and I drank a lot of coffee. Uh, I smoked a lot of cigarettes. Don't smoke cigarettes anymore, by the way. I'm really happy
That,
about that.
that's awesome.
And yeah, so it's the sobriety, the alcohol free time that I have now. It has been a journey. It's been an adventure. I in 2018 met a woman. She was a drinker at the time, and in 2019 she stopped with no
Nice.
pressure from me, no nudging from me or anything. She quit, and I won't tell her story, but we're married now. We run 2 businesses together. We're real estate agents, and we just I just feel so glad that things got back on track. I wish I could say that I knew how or why it's all happened, but I think a big part of how it has happened is me being willing to look at things from another perspective rather than just my own.
Sure.
But yeah, that's kind of my story right there, Scott. And I just I'm not a low bottom person, perhaps, but I've done some really embarrassing things, and I've hurt people. I've lost friends because of my drinking and my poor behavior, and I've thrown away so much money. And uh, just because I have 10 years doesn't mean that I don't have a story. I got a story. I got some pain, and the pain that somebody's feeling as they're approaching uh, what they hope is their day one, or if they're in early sobriety. Like, I relate to that. The conversations that are going on Twitter that we see so often, there's some incredible uh, conversations going on there. And when I see what people write when they're early on about, like, I had a bad day today, but I didn't drink. I remember that, and I have bad days right now, and I don't drink either. And
Sure.
that means that I have some connection with that person. And
Yeah.
that's a
Well,
beautiful, beautiful thing.
that 10 years of sobriety, you not drinking today is just as important as them not drinking on day 3. I
Mhm.
think, oh crap, I had a thought and I lost it. Oh. Nope, I lost it. It's gone. Yeah, but I think Twitter is great because that healthy reminder to see that and get those refreshers because you could drink today. I could go out and we could drink today. So to look at it as, you got X amount of time, that shit show is going to pick up right where it left off the moment that you put that bottle to your lips. From my
Mhm.
experience, and and hearing from other people. So man, I wrote down a lot of things, a lot of good stuff. Um, so I wanted to ask you, you got put into this facility, and it's really weird. They called it a
Straight,
corporation,
straight incorporated.
incorporated. Ah, that
Yeah.
is terrible. That's just incorporated. Yeah, we're gonna fix you in a corporation. That's fantastic. So what I wanted to ask you about that is there's a lot of discussion about being pushed into recovery, but we all know that you need to want recovery. So you got pushed into this thing, but you got something out of it to remain sober for a few years, right?
Hmm.
So I guess if you have any thoughts on the push versus want and what you think kept you sober for those couple of years, was it just the understanding of the disease itself? What do you think it was that kept you sober for a couple of years?
That's an interesting question. I mean, like it may have been me just going through the motions and wanting to please people, honestly.
Sure,
Or it might have been that I latched on to somebody there and just found like a little friendship, and I was like, well, these people have to be my friends because they're here in this room. And whereas if I'm outside of this room, everybody can just walk away from me. But if I'm here, they have to listen to me.
sure,
I don't know how much of that is there, but I have very much been guilty at times in my life of just going along with things. And a lot of that I really learned in that place because you have to go along in order to get along.
sure,
Um, but to the bigger point though of like, can you be pushed into recovery? I just don't I really don't believe that. I mean, maybe that can work for other people. I know that there's, interventionists and
sure.
people who try to get people to go to rehab, or, you need to go to a meeting, or I want to give you this advice, or you need to take a look at your drinking. None of that stuff worked with me. And I think that it is such a sensitive, it is almost, I think, as uncomfortable. And I often forget this too as I engage in some of these conversations on Twitter. It is so difficult for people to open up about this. It is like I put it in the same category as talking about your sex life. Like it really is something that's private. It's private and it's personal, and there's a lot of shame that surrounds it. And I just don't think that you can get out a defibrillator and just make somebody, receive this information. I think that for me, I had to want it. I had to reach that point. And I'm not saying that for me, there's a rock bottom. I think rock bottom, if I had one, is a period of about 5 or 6 years where my life was really just out of control and the drinking was so consistent and insane. But I needed to make that decision on my own. And when I woke up that Monday morning, I felt ashamed enough of my behavior the day before that I was motivated to do something about it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. It has to be the want. You have to want it for yourself. You have to care enough about yourself. You have to create something, you have to want to create something that you don't want to lose. And a lot of times I think people hear that, um, they get really hurt by that because, oh, well, I'm not good enough for you to quit drinking. The kids aren't good enough for you to quit drinking. And that's not the case. If it was that simple, nobody would be addicted. Um, I think you kind of mentioned it when you said you had those couple of years after you got out of there, you were kind of doing it for other people or going through the motions, so you're doing that for your AA people, and it didn't work. It wasn't until you made that decision yourself, I'm done, and yeah, I do agree too. It's really hard for people to talk about this stuff. And I think that's why it's so important that I've made the decision that I'm going to talk about everything. I'm going to get on and I'm going to do a half an hour podcast about this was my thinking today. um I don't want to do this recovery shit anymore. I want to drink. I'm going to be as honest as I can because I think it's going to help me. It's going to be a hold accountability to me to continue to do what I'm doing because I am a dead man if I don't. I mean, you don't get Narcan as an alcoholic without being in a pretty bad way. You know what I mean? And just to go with that too, you had mentioned about rock bottom. I think one thing that everybody needs to realize too, if they're listening to this and they're wondering, well, I'm not that bad yet, because that's what almost killed me. Going to AA meetings and saying I'm not that bad yet. Going to treatment the first time and looking at the dude trying to climb into the dryer because he thinks it's like a treehouse or something. I'm not that bad yet. I can keep going because I'm not that bad yet. Um, I was having a conversation with somebody one time, and it's like, when you have somebody that was raised a billionaire, like a child was raised a billionaire, and their dad or their parents didn't buy them for Ferrari, they bought them something else. That's the worst day of their life. Well, that's equal to our worst day of their life. I mean, it sounds stupid, but it really is, because the worst day of your life is the worst day of your life. It might not be, somebody else might look at it and say, well, I wish that was my worst day, but you feel the same way about it. You know what I mean? I try not to, I really want people to know that, your worst life is that. And it is just as equal to mine. Just because I have 4 OWIs and I've spent some time in jail and another person has it, that doesn't mean that their life didn't suck as bad as mine to them, right? So yeah, I think that's important for people to know that, if you're sitting here and you want to recover and you're looking at it and you're saying, I'm not that bad yet, don't let that be the little carrot that you go chasing, because you will get there as if you keep chasing that carrot.
Yeah, the program, the Alcoholics Anonymous, is filled with so much wisdom,
Mhm.
and I understand that the program is not for everybody. I understand that. I understand that people are intimidated by the spiritual nature of it, and I don't go to meetings anymore. I won't say that I'm done with AA. Like, if my youngest brother is in the program, and if he were in town, or we were up north, and he invited me to go to a meeting, I'd go to a meeting with him. I kind of look at it almost like, as, I'm not saying this to be disrespectful, like almost like Catholicism. Like, if I walk into a church, I'm going to go like this. I'm just going to do it. And I could go to an AA meeting and I could identify myself as an alcoholic, because I don't know. I've been to a million AA meetings. I'm not uncomfortable with it. I know that that word turns a lot of people off, but when somebody's considering, like, oh man, do I have a drinking problem? Do I have a drinking problem? And then they get on Instagram and they look up, sober life or sober curious, and they see all of these pictures of these, women in their 30s on the beach, holding these signs, I'm 30 days, 6 months sober today. That guy is not going to relate to that. You
Right.
know, what he's going to relate to is you and me,
Yep.
and the sharing that we're doing right now. Like, yeah, is being sober and being really successful and good looking and losing weight and having a great life and a great career and all that, is that fun? Yes, I want all that. And you know what? I'm getting all that because I've been busting my ass and staying sober for a long time. But to the person who's hurting, right? They are going to relate more to something that you have to say
Sure.
when we're real talking, and we're saying, like, look, we were here, but we're here now. We've come this far, but we haven't forgotten where we were, and that's part of how we get to stay here and keep moving up. It's because we
Right.
keep that fresh.
For sure. I agree. And I don't attend as many AA meetings, maybe as some would say I should. I do go to some of the other meetings that they have around here that aren't, AA affiliated. Look, they have to they have to go. I'm just going to give you my own opinion for a second. They have to go through. They have to read the 12 steps. How it works. They have to read, the preamble and all that stuff. That's just the way AA is set up. And for me, sometimes you get through that and 20 minutes have gone through the meeting, and the parts that are important, I think, are the sharing, and it does get a little bit redundant, but I personally too, I love the program. I think it is great. I cannot even fathom, I can't understand how Bill W. came up with this in 1930, and it still is very relevant today. The whole part where he's beating on the bar and he's like, how did this happen again? I think that is such a huge thing because it can happen that quick. So AA is so useful. I got turned off to a lot of meetings too because it became a church service, and
Mhm.
that's not what it's supposed to be. That's on the people that are running the meeting to kind of, you got to let people thank whoever they're thankful to. I'm not saying that, but when it becomes a sermon, and I remember one time I was in a meeting in early recovery, and the lady is like, "Well, I'm just going to say it. You know, God, Jesus is the answer, and if you don't believe in Jesus, then you're doomed." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just keep that to yourself. But I also do believe, and I brought this up in podcast before, you go to an AA meeting, you can find something. I remember a speaker meeting when I was in treatment, worst speaker I've ever heard, but right at the end, he said this quote, and I was like, wow, that quote was amazing. You can find something, but it goes back to the want. So I guess AA is great. I agree. I will go to meetings when it presents itself. There's one here in my hometown now that I'm back in the hometown. I went to a couple weeks ago. I'll probably go again this Thursday just to be with the guys. It's something to do, get out of the house because I don't have that option. But anyway, I'm rambling on now. So one thing you said early on, maybe retouch on this and add to it if you'd like. You said, you were a kid, you weren't a bad kid. No, absolutely not. And I don't think any of us are really bad. We're good people doing bad things. That doesn't make you a bad person. I did a lot of bad things. I said a lot of things that I shouldn't have done. I stole money. Obviously the lies are just, you can't even, I wrote that on here too, but we'll come back to the lies and the weight that I feel lifted off me living an honest life. That pressure and trying to remember everything is just so relieving. So yeah,
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. It's not having to remember everything and having some integrity about my life now is amazing. And I think like I would say that 90% of that integrity that I have comes from removing alcohol almost exclusively. Like there's other work that I did to better myself, but getting rid of the alcohol, stopping drinking was able to like lift the veil up, and I was able to see this other world that was out there through lenses that were clear. But I also got a good look at myself. Like, man, there's some stuff that I'm not doing right either. Like I need to make some corrections with what I'm doing. And fortunately, that's happened. Back to the AA thing really quick. I left this one group. I was going there for probably 4 years. Nice group, good group of people. But right around the election in 2016, things just
Hmm.
started getting bananas in that meeting. A lot of politics got inserted into that meeting. I started to, I probably am very opposite of the political beliefs of the people in this particular meeting. So there was that level of uncomfortability, but I'll listen to anybody who's got a drinking problem, who wants to talk about it.
Sure.
But it just became too overwhelming, and I left. I ended up finding an agnostic meeting that I really liked, and the people in there were cool. And the guy who I used asked to be my sponsor, he was one of the kind of trustees, stewards, if you will, of the meeting. It was him and his husband who took care of this meeting, and they were great because they made sure that politics stayed out of it.
Right
They
on.
made sure that people spoke from the I position rather than the we position, and that there wasn't any lecturing in there. And there was a good sense of camaraderie among the, our 11 or 15 regulars who went to that meeting. And I ended up outgrowing it. I that might sound like a rude thing to say, but it didn't resonate with me
No,
uh, as much over time. So
sure.
I stopped going, and I met my wife, and she got sober, and she got sober a different way than I did. She used an online program, an online community, and there are just such a ton of different ways to get into being sober, and none of them are incorrect if the result is that
Bingo.
you better.
Bingo. Yeah. And it goes back to honesty with yourself. If you're honest with yourself and you don't want to go to the meetings because you've moved past that, they don't seem to be helping like they did. And you're not going to meetings because that's how you feel and you're going to pursue another pathway, that's great. If you're lying to yourself and saying, well, I'm not going here because this is just too religious for me. I'm not going to this meeting because, this is dumb and I'm not like these people. You just got to be honest to why you're not going to meetings. And I'm with you 100%. I don't go to a bunch of meetings. I know if I had a sponsor today, they'd be like, dude, you got to go to meetings. because that's what they know. But I need to be doing this. I need to have conversations. I need to be, on Twitter and reading what people are saying. That's what's working for me right now, and that's what I'm going to do. And I that's a great point that you made. If it's working for you, then that's all that matters. There is no clear-cut way to recover. There are many, many ways to do it. Some people just say, I'm done. And God bless them. I don't know how you do that, but that as long as you don't drink today, however you did that, get it.
Yeah, some people, I know people who have done that. There are stories of people who read a certain book, some piece of literature that just resonates with them, and then bang, they're done. Wasn't like that for me. And it continues to not be like that. The thing that keeps me going in my sober life, my alcohol-free life, whatever we choose to call it, is connection with people. Like, I don't have a sponsor, but I have two guys in my life who I talk to deeply,
Sure.
at least once a week. I mean, we talk every day, but I'm talking like vulnerable, for real stuff about what's really going on with me.
Yep.
That little back and forth that my wife had that didn't go so great the other day, I might rehash that with him and just say, look, I know where I'm wrong. I know,
Sure.
but I just want to talk about this and work through this. Like, that is a huge piece of my sobriety, is just that honesty and that accountability. The fact that I have a wife who I can talk to about this sort of stuff. Like, she's rational. She wants me to win. I want her to win. It's not a competition. We're on the same team, but things happen and we can work through those things. And that's because I don't drink anymore. I have a little extra, not a superpower, but I'm not inhibited by this roadblock in front of me that's telling me all these lies. I
Sure.
just have the regular ingrown lies of whoever I am, of just my upbringing and stuff.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, and my favorite quote of all time is connection is the opposite of addiction. You have a good connection. I have a friend that I can talk to about it. I have multiple friends, but I have one in particular that I can go to with anything, and he's going to give it to me straight. Yeah, he's going to say, "Dude, you're kind of being ridiculous." You know what I mean? And that's so crucial. And I never get mad at him. I know where he's coming from. And it's a place of love and caring. And if I don't understand what he's saying, I'll go meditate on it. But yeah, it's absolutely vital
We
to
have
have that
like
connection.
So my wife and I, and also another couple of friends of mine, we kind of have this little saying, and that's, may I have permission to speak freely? May
Oh,
I have permission to speak freely? And like, when I say that to my friend and he says yes, it's not my turn to judge. He's not giving me the green light to judge him and to size him up upside down. And vice versa, by the way. He calls me out too, and I love it. It's We're giving each other permission to just kind of call balls and strikes on each
sure.
other, right?
Yeah.
Like, that didn't look like it was over the plate, my friend. That looked like it was outside. And I just want to go to the replay and have you look at this, because I think that there's something that you're missing. And when that conversation is happening, that's when the growth is happening,
Sure.
you know? And it's not ever from a sense of like superiority or like, I'm better than you or you did this wrong. It's not accusatory in any way. It's more like, look, dude, I want to see you win. I know you're better than this,
Right.
you know? And those people who call you out, who call me out, those people have our best interest in mind.
Yeah. Right. No, and that's great. Yeah. And then it reminds me of the relationship I have with my buddy. I'm laughing over here because it just immediately brought me back to my ex-wife, and she would start thinking, Scott, I'm not trying to be mean, but insert extremely mean comment. Yeah, so it obviously didn't have that kind of connection, communication, that open lines of communication there. That's why I was laughing so hard about that.
But friendship is beautiful, man. It's like, it's camaraderie, it's life, like, I'll get on the phone with my good friend and we will laugh for an hour to the
Yep.
point of where we have tears coming down our faces. And then there's the next conversation might be one of the most vulnerable and productive and real conversations ever.
Sure.
And I just like that. If I don't have that in life, what is life worth? I feel so lucky that I have the friends that I do and the wife that I do, who, it's just, that's a gift. That's a gift.
It really is. And it's good. It's a good way to evaluate things too. Because if somebody's listening to this and saying, man, I don't have any friends that I could be completely vulnerable with. If I told this person everything, what you got to remember too, it doesn't have to be necessarily one person that you are completely vulnerable with. You might be able to talk about this person, about your physical, what you don't like about your physical self. And then you might be able to talk about this to this other person about your mental health. As long as you can get it all out, that's the big thing. And I think you just need to find that. I think that's very important in recovery. And for some people, that's the groups. Some people that's a sponsor, but it's not for everybody.
And it's not for everybody, right? Like those things aren't for everybody, but friendship and that camaraderie is not the same in every instance, right?
Sure.
And I'm guilty of looking at other people and being jealous of like, oh, look at them and their group of friends. They're so tight and they have all this fun and they're going out and doing this. And like, I'm not included in that. And I would sit there in the past, even in sobriety, I'd be like, it would run through my head. I'd be like, man, I'm jealous of those people. Like, I just wish that what are they doing that makes them look so happy? You know, other people have nothing to do with me. I'm the only one who's doing this. And if I want something that they have, the onus is on me to go out and get it.
Sure.
And I can't just conjure it up overnight. I have to, extend an olive branch to somebody, take a risk, go out, have a conversation with somebody, open up, develop a friendship. And as an adult friendships are hard. It's hard to make connections with people as an adult because when you're 13, 12, you're around each other all the time. You're riding bikes, throwing baseballs and hanging out and everything. And you're there. But as an adult, it's life, it's busy, it's work, it's kids, it's all this other stuff. And, sometimes that gets put to the back burner. But for me, it's like, I got to have that stuff on the front burner as
Yeah.
much as I can.
Yep. Yeah, I know the days that I don't talk to my buddy and I don't talk about the people that I care about or I'm connected with or have that connection with, I feel worse. I spend a lot more time down, and isolated by not reaching out to them. I always feel better after I do it, even though I can do my damnedest to talk myself into not sending it. I don't feel like talking right now about it's not the right thing to do. Something else you said in there too, that I think is really important. You said that it's your responsibility how you feel about someone or something. And I think that's very important because, if somebody hurts your feelings, it's going to happen. We're human, right? Somebody's going to hurt your feelings, but when somebody does something and how you feel about it, that's on you. If you sit there and dwell on it and stew on it, you got to find a way to get around that. And I've been doing some more certifications online, and it's been talking about that quite a bit. Like, letting outside factors influence you. You are responsible how you feel and how you react to something, and it's easier said than done. I'm not sitting here being like, oh yeah, well, if this woman pulls my heart out and stomps on it, I'm not going to feel hurt. You know what I mean? I get that. But to realize that, to be able to turn the station, I guess, if you will, and go about something else and not dwell on it. I think that's very important.
Yeah. If somebody hurts my feelings, my feelings are my responsibility. And if I want what they have, I do have to go and work to get it. And it might not be that I want a friendship with them, or what I want might not be with them. It might not have anything to do with them. But now I have a couple of thoughts running away from them. Can we get them back? Let me get this one back here. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So there's great conversations on Twitter about sobriety and recovery, and that's beautiful. But another category that I follow, another topic that I follow, stoicism. How unbelievable is that? And I didn't really come to that until maybe, 4 or 5 years ago. And I can't say that I'm some wise practitioner of these things, but I've curated my feed to where I do see some Marcus Aurelius quotes here and there and some
Yeah.
Seneca. And, and these things are just great launching points for conversation. And they really do have the power to reach me and make me think about things in a different way. And the Stoics talked a lot um, about gratitude, about savoring the time that we have, and how we're going to be gone, and we don't get to choose when that happens, and it could be a lot sooner than we think.
Sure.
So why don't we just try to enjoy it? There's a lot of wisdom in the things that are really simple. And I think the Stoics get that right. And I think it ties so much of it, I think ties in perfectly to how I try to live my life as a sober man.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. Yeah. Reading the Poetic Edda has been one of my favorite reads. Odin talks about sitting, the wise man sits and listens. The fool is always out there, always got something to respond to. Yeah. And I talked about this in a podcast about, living for the day and the future right now, because it's not guaranteed. It is unreal. And I can recognize it here. So I'm hoping that I can make my mindset a little better. It's like, I'm 41. So, I'm gonna, most people are retiring when they're at 70, and I haven't been working for a couple of years because I've been diving into recovery. I couldn't hold the job because I was too drunk all the time, so it feels like I am so close to being too old to work, but finding a job and getting back on my feet seems so far away. And it just, our mind, it's pardon the expression, but I mean, we're fucked in the head a little bit. There's a How to Unfuck Your Brain is a good book too, by the way. And it talks a little bit about that. Yep.
Well, it's just so weird the way, like, I think you get inside of your head in very much the same way that I get inside of my head, where I feel like I start something and I'm going towards it, and then I get veered off, distracted in some way. And then whatever the goal is, I'm like, well, I'm just going to give up. I can't do it. Somebody else has already done it,
Right.
And that right there is what I want to break.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot say, Scott, that I've cracked that code in myself. Okay. I know that I'm close. I feel like I can see it. I feel like it's around the corner, but my propensity to give up on something because I don't know how, because I don't
Yeah.
understand how to do it right in a professional way, or like, I can't get this job, I can't do that, somebody else is going to be better than me, so why should I even try? Every single last bit of that is in my head. Now I've gotten some of it out sometimes, and then it'll come back, but I'm like, I'm on a mission to learn how to deal with these things, because that to me is just as much of a barrier to getting to where I want to go as alcohol would be. These
Sure.
destructive, awful thoughts inside of my head that just, it's embarrassing to say this out loud, but it's the truth. And this is a podcast that is built on the truth. So I'll say it. Like, I think the worst thing is about myself, and the conversation that is going on inside of my head sometimes is so freaking unhealthy. And I opened up to my brother about this the other day, because and my brother is my youngest brother, he's your age, he's 40, in his early 40s. He's thin, he's really good looking, he's taller than I am, and like, now I'm almost at the same weight as he is, And I took a picture of myself the other day, like from the side, so he could see that my gut was gone. And I said it to him. He lives in San Diego. And I was like, hey, I just want to let you know that I've been really disciplined and working really hard to reach this goal. And I finally just hit 180 the other day. And I'm just like amazed, you know? So like, if I'm able to do this, if I'm able to discipline myself and do that, I have no excuse to why I can't discipline myself and to do other things, both within my work and within relationships. And I didn't get sober to live in this world of like, I got to fear the disease. I got to worry about the alcohol that's around the car. I got to
Right.
stay away from the liquor stores. You never know when I might. All of
Yep.
that's true. Okay. That is all true for me.
Yep.
But to become the better man that I want to be, I have to overcome some of this other stuff. And that's me being real with you right now, is that I just am sometimes riddled with self-doubt.
Oh,
So, and I am like, it's like having 70,000 people. Like, it's like having a football stadium full of people telling me that I can't do it or laughing at me. That's what
good.
it feels like sometimes,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
man. Yep.
And this isn't external, it's internal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's what I'm working on. That's the real Rich talking to you right now.
Hell yeah, man. I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. We have something like 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, like the people in the stadium that you talked about. How many of those are negative toward ourselves? And
Mhm.
the reading I did when I read that, it said, would you let somebody else talk to you the way that you talk to yourself inside your head? Probably not. Um, just and it's so important. I did a podcast where I talked about making your bed. Like, to start your day on a positive note is so crucial in recovery. I know it is for me. The days that I don't start on a positive note, those negative thoughts come in and they'll compound real fucking quick. Pardon my French, but this is an adult podcast, so uh, yeah, they'll pile up real quick. You know what I mean? And it's in those little things. You got to retrain your brain. You know what I mean? And that's what recovery is all about. And even with 10 years of sobriety, you're still working on it, but that shouldn't deter anybody. You're able to do it. All the negative thoughts and things that you've had over the last 10 years, you found a way to not drink, and that's a victory. That's 10 years of victories. So I think that's the important thing to look at for sure.
When you talked, because I did listen to that episode where you talked about making your bed, and that's a big thing in some of the hardcore AA worlds, right? Where it's
Sure.
like, hit your knees when you wake up, hit your knees before you go to bed, make your bed, all those things that like some of those like die hard, unfiltered cigarette smoking old
Yeah.
timers say,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Like, but there's wisdom in it. Like, where's the wisdom? The wisdom is all around us. There's wisdom in the making the bed because it's a discipline, it's a practice. I make the bed. What I'm telling myself with that act is I am worthy of returning to a bed that's made.
Sure.
You know, I'm worthy of having the space that I occupy be neat and clean and to look
Yeah.
good, right?
Yeah.
And in my drinking, it was not that way. It was not that way at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Like 3 or 4 days after I did the podcast, I was making my bed before the podcast, and then I made it after the podcast, and like 3 or 4 days later, I didn't make the bed, and I crawled into the bed, and the sheets are all screwed up, and I'm trying to cover up. It was a chillier night, and I'm like, God dang it! And I'm like, son of a bitch! Like, if you just would have practiced what you preached, this is your fault, dude. You should have got up. You know what I mean? I'm all mad at myself for not doing it. But it makes a huge difference, And then I was awake because I was beating myself up for not making my bed. But I was more laughing at myself than beating myself up. But yeah, those little things are huge, and every little thing that you can build in a positive way in early recovery is extremely important. Well, I won't keep you too much longer, man. We've been going at it for a minute. I just wanted to I asked one time when I had a guest on, and I'm not going to do it anymore. But I asked, like, for like an embarrassing moment. That's too personal for it. I think a better way is I will ask you if you're willing to recall one of your worst hangovers or one of your worst detoxes to kind of illustrate. Like me, I've talked about looking at the clock and dry heaving. Puking to the point where I'm dry heaving and pouring sweat and wanting to die, and I had a hallucinate. I don't think I talked about that, but I had a hallucination so bad. I was in a dream. I woke up in a dream and I couldn't wake up. I'll have to talk about that in another podcast. But if you're willing to share something, about a bad detox, please feel
Well,
free.
um, I remember this one night, a lot of my drinking took place in this 5 or 6 year span that I had a really good job working for this radio station. And there was a concert at one of the big arenas up north of the city. And it was a Sunday night. And the pregame hosted by the radio station was at this bar. And I was there. I was there hosting it. And, I'm on the clock, I'm getting paid. Well, the concert starts and I stayed at the bar and I proceeded to get myself sideways at that bar. Mind you, I'm representing the company that I work for during this.
Sure.
Um, I don't remember a lot of the night. I The little bit that I do remember the last part of was somebody telling me that I needed to sit down and calm down and not be so loud, and that I was saying some things that could really get me in trouble. I recollect that.
Sure.
Um, I woke up at the family of the guys who owned the bar's house, and I woke up to, his wife knocking on the door, and it had to be like, I don't know, 9 o'clock in the morning, I think. And, she said, I have some coffee. Do you want any? And I mean, it was just an embarrassing moment for
Sure.
me. Drinking professionally, everything. I just, that was a big, fat, embarrassing moment, which I could have lost my job for, honestly. I don't know what I did. Um, that's just one incident, though. There's been a ton of those.
Sure. Well, and it's great that you didn't lose your job over that. I I was representing the company with my boss, taking out some clients, working in Dow Chemical up here, a huge plant. Well, everybody knows what Dow is.
Mhm.
And we went out to dinner before a hockey game, and I pre-drank so much. By the time the food came, I was picking my steak up and eating it with my bare hands like a cookie. So my hands are, and so I'm sitting there and the customers are looking at me. And the next thing I remember is my ex-fiance, she's picking me up and I'm crying, oh, and I got called in the office. We talked about it. We laughed about it, you know, and luckily I didn't lose my job. I ended up losing it ultimately because of alcohol anyway, but there's good people out there, and by doing this and talking about it, people are going to get more and more grace, I think. So I'm really appreciative that they gave me that little bit of grace, allowed me to work a little bit longer. But yeah, I get it, man.
Hey man, I'm glad that we both made it to this moment and we're both right here and we're doing okay. If I can ask you a question, what's happening with the podcast? I have to say I really admire what you do and how you put yourself out there. I'm not trying to heap a bunch of praise on you, but
Sure.
I think what you do is really important, fostering these type of conversations, allowing people a space to do it. What's your goal and what's coming up?
Oh man, well, I I spent some time in jail, so I got some episodes planned out, and I'm trying to decide on what the best way to go is. Do it. It's kind of once a week, maybe twice a week right now, as far as putting it out, as far as content. I don't want it to get dry. I would do a guest every single day if I could. Um, my ultimate goal for the podcast is just to be a continuation of what I want to do for a living, and that's. And I wanted to ask you about that. You said you're a coach. The recovery coach, I think, is what I'm working for right now. I think I think both are going to be important. I want the podcast to be something, I want the podcast to reach more than, 70, 80 people. I want it to be something because I think there's something to be said about everyday people coming on and sharing their stories. I mean, I love reading about Gerard Butler and what's his face that played Iron Man. I love reading those stories about celebrities, but everyday people I connect with them more, and so when my cousin Crystal came on and she shared her story, you know, I know it helped her sharing, but this helps me. In AA, they'll tell you it's a selfish program. It's a different kind of selfish. I have you on to help you share your story, but hearing what you have to say helps me in turn. And by me doing the podcast, um, and getting my things out there, I feel 100% better every time I do it. So what do I want from the podcast? I want to be successful, but whether it becomes successful or not is irrelevant. I'm going to continue to do it. Um, and it's going to be something, at one point I am going to convince my ex-fiance to come on here and have a chat with me. And we're going to be as open and honest as we can. She's working on it. She said she's trying to work up the courage. And I think that podcast is going to be so helpful for her and I and so many other people out there. And that's what I want this to be. I don't edit these things because it's not authentic. I feel like when I had that brain fart and I couldn't remember where I was going, that's just what it is. It's going to stay out there. Yeah. Would I like to improve the quality? Sure. But yeah, for the podcast, yeah, I have hopes and dreams. I got the Facebook page. It's growing a little bit. Twitter's doing pretty good. But I would like to spread the message because I do think, I mean, I haven't met you for all that long, and you said you're getting something on my podcast, and that just means so much to hear that.
Yeah.
And so I think you can hear the same thing from 100 people, but that 101st person that says it, it can click. So I'm hoping to be that 101 for as many people as I can.
Well, it's so wild and so awesome that we have this way of communicating with each other and that we're able to connect in this manner. And, I'd love to know like what you're doing with, the coaching and your goals for that, because what part of what I want to create inside of the coaching and even outside of it is I just want there to be a place where people can get help or just have a conversation and talk,
Sure.
or listen to content that's going to help them, that isn't fake and that isn't real
Right.
fluffy and like, hey, I got 6 months today, I'm on
Hmm.
Instagram, look at how great my life is, because there are times in early sobriety where life is just not great.
Right.
And there are times years on where sobriety has not been great. But those days are few and far between. I just want to reach men, and I want to get better by helping others. And I want those people to radiate stuff back to me that makes me think about things differently so that I can improve.
Absolutely.
And I think that if we can get a community going where we're all kind of working to lift each other up, like that's going to be awesome. And when we're doing it with each other, we're away from restrictions and rules and the government, and we can really make ourselves better, in a way that we know and are confident in. And that's what I want to do in my in my coaching, because I know that I struggled, and I just hope that when I was listening to you tell your story on the podcast, I was like, man, if this reaches even one
Sure.
person, and it makes them pull the car over and rethink what they're doing, and then that sets off a change in their life, something amazing will have happened by virtue of you starting this podcast.
Sure.
And that is flipping. I mean, that is amazing.
Yeah.
And I want to be a part of that. And I want to watch it. I want to support it however I can.
Well, you're doing that by being on here, man. And thank you so much for that too. And I think the one people that get forgotten a lot in this too are the Al-Anon people. My first guest was from the Al-Anon side of it. Friends and family of alcoholics, they're suffering too. And there's a lot of things that they don't understand, you know. Like we mentioned earlier, why can't they do it for me? Why can't they do it for the kids? Well, to hear it from other people, to realize that their person is not an anomaly. And I know as an alcoholic, I feel like an anomaly, like I'm the only one that's ever experienced this, and that's not true. And to be able to show, that connection, that your someone is acting this certain way, but it's the disease, it's
Mhm.
they want to quit. When they say they want to quit, I mean, I've quit 10,000 times since I started drinking. It's just this one is the one that seems to be sticking. So I think this needs to be out there for the people that are struggling in the addiction, and it needs to be out here for the people that are around it. I think they're just as important as anybody else. And I got something I'll talk to you when we close out here, that I kind of started. It's I haven't pushed it at all, but something we'll talk about afterwards. So,
Okay.
final thoughts?
No, that's it. I mean, I'm just grateful for the opportunity. And if there's somebody who's listened all the way to the very end of this
Yeah,
thing,
yeah,
first of all, thank you for visiting, and tuning into this conversation. I think conversations are great, and when they're good and they're real, they're even better. And to the guy, to the woman out there who's struggling, you know, there's great stuff on the other side of this, and it's I would hope that I can speak for the lion's share of people who aren't using anymore, who would call themselves sober, that we really are pulling for you, and that it is our desire that you find what you're looking for, but I can't force it on you, but I am here for you, and I want to encourage you as best I can. And if the only interaction that we ever have is just you hearing this podcast and hearing me and Scott talk right now, you know, just I wish you well, and I mean that. I want you to find a way to get out of that dark place, whether it's reading a book, whether it's going to a meeting, whether it's calling a friend, but just however it is that you're going to get your stuff pointed in the direction that you really want to go, do it. We get one shot at this, and I like the way that I live, and I would choose this a million times
yeah,
over the way that I did live.
yep. It is worth it. You are worth it. There is hope. It might seem insurmountable, but you're looking at 10 years of sobriety right here. A very happy dude. I'm heading that direction, and I've never been this happy. So There is hope. It'll get there, man.
We're all
So
going the same speed, man.
hell
One
yeah.
day at a time.
Hell yeah. Well, Rich, thank you so much, man. This was awesome. I knew it was going to be awesome. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know there are people be listening to the end because I feel like it was that good. So, um, hope to see you again. Maybe
Absolutely.
11, maybe we'll come back and revisit, see how things are
I,
going.
I would love to. I really appreciate your kindness and generosity, Scott. Thank you very much.
Sure, man. All right. Take care, buddy.